And we are live. It's that time for Disputed Lands. We with our special guest Aaron Sampson tonight. We're doing this without Chad. Aaron, how you doing, man?
Doing good. I miss you guys. I would have liked to see Chad too, but I'm sure he's gonna be watching. I'll catch up with him.
All right, so tell our people here, our listeners, a little bit about yourself for anybody who's not familiar with you.
All right. Well, I mean, I guess just from the beginning, I was raised in a very Christian upbringing, and I kind of always joke about, like, if I was going to write a book, I would call myself the prodigal Samson, my last name being Sampson, and just kind of my life story was being raised and given all the tools, and then kind of going my own way and doing my own thing. So I kind of live that life, and the thing that I like out of my testimony that I think is amazing is that God never forgot about me and my dedication, like what me giving myself to him at a young age. He always kept coming back and like helping me pick up the pieces of the disaster that I made. So that's I mean, if God can take me from where I was to where I am today, I mean, he can do it for anybody. That's one of the most, there's never a time when you're too far gone. Like if you take that time to sign that contract basically with God, he's never going to forget about you. And I mean, I think that's one of the most amazing things about kind of my testimony in general. Cause I went as far into the pig cellar as you can go. Just kind of chasing, what I wanted out of life. Cause I wasn't patient. I hadn't learned the lessons I need to learn. And one of the things I learned along the way is God's going to teach you a lesson one way or another. Either you can listen to your parents and listen to, what the Bible says and just take it for what it is and go that route, or you can learn the hard way. And Samsons are always stubborn. So I like the road, that's really bumpy, and you learn those lessons you don't ever forget.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, what got me where I am right now is it's kind of a funny story because God's always used things that like really interested me or got me into something so that he could teach me a lesson. And I was real big into gaming for a while. I've been a DJ for years upon years. So that was also like a real big passion that he used. But I got into like gaming, and I had a bunch of friends that were online streamers and stuff like that. And they were like, "Oh man, you got the voice for it. You need to get on here, and you got a personality. You can, keep people entertained. You got to get on here." So I jumped on Twitch and was streaming on Twitch for a couple of video games that I really liked. And in that process, like I had to learn all of these tools for how the cameras work and mics and overlays and, how to broadcast and all that other kind of stuff. And my channel went and picked up really quick, really fast. So much so I got an affiliation, which is not quite a partnership, but I got an affiliation like really quick. Everybody was like, "Man, how'd you get that already?" But the funny thing is I got into the gaming, I got the whole thing going. I was building up steam, and then all of a sudden I just burn out. I didn't want to do it. I was playing like 8 hours a day, like streaming. And then I just didn't want to do it anymore. And so I just quit. The funny thing about it was that like, God's like, "Okay, well, now that you've learned all this stuff," because that was one of my biggest like peeves, was that what kept hanging me up was I didn't know how to do all this stuff. And so he used that to like teach me how to do all that stuff. And then he said, "Well, now that you know how to do all that stuff, I want you to start making videos." And so, I mean, I built my Facebook page because I felt like, I mean, he's been calling me to do this for a long time. So I made my Facebook page, I think back in 2015, so about 4 years ago. And this whole kind of transition happened in the last couple of years. And so I was really feeling it. And then I went to the First Take on the World conference, and all the people that I've been watching for years and learned and like actually, it's one thing to watch somebody and get to know them through a channel, but like to actually get to know a person and hang out with them and spend time with them is completely different. And we actually got to meet them and realize like that they were just like me. They were, they started off a certain way, and, then they got, God just did things for them and got them where they were at to get their message out. And that's kind of the funny thing is what I told you earlier when I talked to you is I've been doing this with this channel for I don't know, like since 2015, and just got my YouTube up, I think about a year or two ago. I think it was 2 years ago now. And I just started doing videos because it was like one thing after another. Of course, you know how the adversary is. It's like puts one thing in your path and then another and then another. Like I got to a point where I was about to start doing videos and then the computer crashed and I lost all of my graphics, everything. So then I had to start over. So it was just one thing after another after another. But it was when I really decided that I was going to be obedient that like God really started like picking up the steam and things started happening. And of course, that's just how things work. I get on the back end of what's happening with YouTube and Copa and everything that's going on there. And like I said, I should have been obedient 4 years ago. But I'm on the back end of that now. And like, I was like, oh, I was sitting in the shower and I'm like, God, I got like 10 subscribers. I've already done 2 videos. I've only got like 10 people watching my channel. I was like, I guess I'm going to try to have to market and stuff like that, you know, do what I did when I was a Twitch streamer, like try to get more people to my channel and stuff. And then it's just funny how God works because like 20 minutes later, I'm getting a message from you. Like, hey, come on my channel, you know? So it's just, it's amazing the things that God can do when you're obedient. When you give over your will, and that's kind of my whole testimony. Up to that point was I was doing things my own way. And when my you know, sandcastle crumbled, I was on my back looking up at God going, this isn't your fault. I did this. I never once blamed God for anything that, you know, that happened in my life. Because I realized that it was my own making. You know, I was trying to build my own world and construct my own, you know, life outside of what God wanted. And it's just amazing to see the things that he can do if you're just obedient. Like that's, I mean, there's nothing greater than seeing things completely outside of your control, like just falling into place. And you go on, that's got to be the fingerprint of God, because I couldn't have even thought about doing that myself. You know, there's no way I could have made that happen. So I mean, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. And
no, yeah, thanks for coming on, man. You know, you were actually on my list of people I wanted to get on here. Speaking of being thankful that you came on, thanks for coming on so last minute too.
Oh yeah, no problem.
The listeners don't know this, but I was scrambling at the very last bit, and I hit up Mr. Sampson here, and he was like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." You know, and this was pretty prior to the show tonight. So
yeah.
That was good.
It's okay. It worked out, man. That's how God wanted it to happen. So
for sure.
You know,
yeah.
I just hope, you know, I mean, anybody that, I don't know, it was my biggest thing is like, I pray before I've been doing my videos and like really been trying to be as humble as possible. That's part of the reason why when I built my channel, you're probably going to see me mispronounce stuff. You're probably going to see me like mess up. I think in my second video I just did, it was about the, I titled it like, what was it? It was like something, loving others. And then it was the parable of the unforgiving servant. But when I started my intro, I called it the Unforgotten servant, like something probably nobody noticed until I said it. But the reason why I'm doing it this way is because I want it to be real. I want to put my face on it. I want it to be live. I'm not going to edit it because to me, I think you can lose stuff in the editing process and the sincerity. And then, you know, there's a lot of YouTubers that I have followed or come across their channels that there's no face to it. There's no audio. It's like a, you know, robot reading it off in the background. And to me, it's so impersonal. So I'm doing all of my stuff like either live or I'm recording it one stop, no editing, that kind of stuff. So because the biggest thing is I don't want people to look up to me. I may be teaching you or reminding you of stuff, but I'm not your teacher. Like that's the Holy Spirit and the Bible's job. I don't want anybody to elevate me. And I want people to realize I'm human. Like that's right. You know, so if I mess up, I mess up, you know, we can, you know, come let me know. And, you know, if I misquote something or I take something out of context, I mean, correction is awesome. That's one of the things, that as God's really been pressing on me lately that I really wanted to talk to people, was about kind of our interactions in our communities, and how we're supposed to be in a community, how there's supposed to be a checks and balances, iron sharpens iron, those kind of things. And I see a lot of groups thinking that a Facebook, you know, like just the group that they're involved in is fellowship, is a community. And it's not, because the community is supposed to we're supposed to hold each other accountable. We're supposed to have brothers and sisters that are keeping us in checks and balances. I'm seeing a lot of these people going way off into left field or way off into right field because they're left by themselves and there's no checks and balances for that system. And I'm seeing a lot of people that are like shooting off into one direction or other. And it's like, well, if you're not over here where we're at or where I'm at, then you must not be a believer. And that's something I'm seeing a lot of. And it's the enemy, the adversary, like planting seeds of division amongst the body.
Right. Unnecessary division.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the things I really want, like, if I could just hammer that constantly, is our interactions between each other. I mean, there's biblical scripture that talks about how we're supposed to go to a brother and how we're supposed to talk and communicate with each other and how we're supposed to correct each other for the best. And if we don't follow those kind of guidelines, like, you can really be putting not only yourself in danger, but also a brother. And I see a lot of people that are kind of going off in different directions, doing their own thing, and then building, like, I joke and say they go into their Torah closet.
Right.
Nobody,
Well, like you said, it's different directions, though. I've been calling this for years now, the pendulum swing. You've got the too far left and the too far right.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but for me, typically you can see it leaning either more legalistic or hyper grace, but it almost always tends to go in one of those two directions.
Right.
And you can do that with almost any kind of movement or group or whatever.
Yeah, but I've seen a lot of those people who were hyper grace on one side just swing right through the middle and go to the other side. So there are those people they're where they're at. They're,
Right.
they're just going to be there. And it's, there are methods and ways about how you're supposed to talk to your brothers and sisters and try to kind of weed that out. You got the 3-strike rule that's talked about. I think, is it Matthew? It's Matthew or Mark. Sorry. I read it in my last one. Where he talks about, you go to your brother, and if he hears you out biblically, then you have won him over. If not, then you go with 2 or 3 witnesses. And this goes back to Deuteronomy, talking about, bearing false witness and having 2 or 3 witnesses come to kind of witness everything that's going on and talk to them. And then if they fail out of that, then you go on to, well, then it's time to kind of kick them out of the community. And that's kind of where you're at. And I think a lot of people jump right past all 3 of those. And then they're on Facebook calling out brothers and sisters for, things. And it's really hurting to not only that person who that may be getting false accusations against them, but also to the people who may study that person or, likes that person's teachings or whatever. Now you've caused division, and now you've got people fighting on both sides because, one person wants to, protect, the person who was being attacked, and the other people are like siding up and ready for battle. And I don't see like any of this, like as in we're supposed to be Christians, right? It means Christ-like.
Right.
And everything that I read in the red letter words of Jesus has never been like, pick a side and, like, we're going to fight each other. It's always been like, if you're not with me, you're against me, or, it's not, let's fight between. And we even saw this in the first century church. There were people that came out as like, oh, I'm of the sect of Paul, or I'm of the sect of this apostle. And Paul did his best to try to like appease that. He wasn't like, I think there was an instance where he was collecting a tithe that was going to be taken to Jerusalem. And he went with some other people so that the people on the other side wouldn't say, oh, well, it's just, Paul is, taking all this money. So he was like doing his best to kind of like keep everybody in unison, like by going out of his way to do what's right and kind of appease everybody. Not to the point of like doing things wrong, but trying to keep everybody in the same place, not causing division.
Right. Trying to keep the peace.
Right.
There's the bridge building, standing in the gap for sure. That's Matthew 18, by the way, the reference that you were talking about with the, if somebody won't listen, if a brother won't listen to a correction, take 1 or 2 more witnesses.
Yeah. And I continued on in my last video that the verses after that I think are really important, that a lot of people take them out of context, where it says, if 2 or more are gathered in my name, there's that whole portion right there. That's really important that I think a lot of people skip. Do you have that in front of you where you can read the next 2 verses?
can have it in just a couple of seconds.
Sorry, I don't mean to drop it on you.
No, you're fine. I love pulling stuff up. I don't do it too much on this show, but typically if I'm discussing something with somebody, Chadwick and I will do this all the time. He'll bring up something. Well, it says this. I'm like, let's pull up and look.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I encourage everyone to do, like, just because somebody says it, like, actually go look it up yourself. And so we all know what Bereans are, but how many of us actually do it? It's like,
sure. Okay, so the verses after it, you're talking about the bind on earth, bound in heaven deal? Right.
That's in the same context of what was being spoken of right before it. All of, and even continuing on, even past that, is talking about if a brother sins. Yeah, that's that whole context of it is at that point when they're removing somebody from there, that's not the end. It's not just boot them out. It goes from that point to then Jesus tells us that we're supposed to, like, continue praying for that person, and whatever we bind, like if we're binding their spirits that they're turned over to, if we're releasing, them to whatever, because God says he'll turn, when a person walks away so many times, he's going to turn them over to their sin, to their tormentors. And so it's saying when we come together, when two or three, it goes right back to what was spoken of in the passage right before it. When two or three are gathered together, whatever you bind in heaven is bound in heaven, whatever you loose in heaven. That's talking in context of a brother in Christ. So once they've relieved, or they're removed from the group, it's not done. Like we're still supposed to be praying for them. We're supposed to be interceding for them. We're supposed to be binding the principalities that are affecting them, and then also loosing protection or whatever God's plan is for that person. We're supposed to be doing that. I mean, if you're in the community, you should know what's affecting that person and what they need, through discernment and through just having a relationship with them. And then it goes on again and says, when two or three are gathered in my name, what was it? Like anything that you ask, can you see the next? Sorry, I don't want to misquote it.
Okay, so for the spot in Matthew 18, because that verse has parallels in other spots, but Matthew 18:19 is, again, I say unto you that if two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven, right? For where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. And that, that's when you're asking, when you base that and compare that to other verses, it's talking about asking in his will. And
right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's a point too, but what you're bringing up there is brilliant, though, in the sense of people are abusing it and twisting it by using it as a means to cut people off. And it kind of shows the condition of the heart in that situation. If you're using the scriptures simply just to cut somebody off and you're not still praying for them, if you're not still praying on the situation, if you're not trying to gather two or three to bring down dominions and strongholds, if you're only gathering two or three to point fingers,
right?
Then what do is that out of love or is that out of hate there?
Right. Right. And that's like one of the biggest things is how we're supposed to love. Like Jesus himself said, the outside world, everyone will know that you are my disciple because of how much you love me and you love each other. Yeah. And he said that in context right after he just was breaking bread with Judas, who was going to betray him, and was washing, the feet of all the disciples, and then tells John that John's going to deny him. And in the midst of that, he says, hey, they will know you because of how much you love each other, Right. And the way that I look at it is if you're an outsider looking in at like a lot of these groups and you see the infighting and you see the bickering, to be honest, I've seen my worldly friends act better than some of the people that claim to be Christians that sure. bicker and fight and go back and forth. And what makes people think that they would want to, like, what kind of outreach is that? Like, who wants to go join that? Right. Yeah. It's you're going to pull the not kind of people you want into the group, because they're going to be like, oh man, this is like, it's blood and gore in here.
Right. You're going to bring angry people who want to be right all the time. That's self-righteousness. Right. The thing is typically in those situations, and it's not saying that the person's possessed or even constantly, but in those moments, that's a religious spirit influencing the situation. That's the problem. And you get sucked in and you start looking at details and you're losing focus of the bigger picture. I don't know if you were a part of those discussions this time at Take on the World, but there was a few debates amongst some of the speakers in our little get together late night crew. Mm. And there was no anger, there was no
Right.
strife, there was no name calling, there was no words that needed to be taken back. There was some hot topics, Aaron, that were being discussed. And I'm not going to bring up names or anything like that, but it was really neat to be a part of that and to see that, because you mentioned the bickering on Facebook and stuff like that, and these exact same topics have been and continually make people unfriend, divide, say things they shouldn't say, cause all kinds of unnecessary division. Because there's a difference between necessary and unnecessary, and we're talking about unnecessary division. And I've seen these topics discussed by true believers who are being led by the Spirit of God in love in that moment to simply just discuss, just like they did in the first few centuries. They gathered together in those synagogues and they're studying all night. They didn't constantly agree on everything. They had to hash it out.
Yep.
They had to study it out and discuss it. You know,
Jesus himself was a part of that when he was even like as a young boy was going to the temple. And that's what there was great division between the Pharisees and Sadducees, but they worked together. Like they didn't believe in the same things by any means. They had great division on major doctrine, and they still worked together because they had one goal, one focus, one ideology that was primary above everything else that's remote and on the outskirts. Like if we focused on the primary topics instead of worrying about all of the little like outskirt issues, which are awesome to talk about, but they should not be division like causing issues.
Right.
And it's awesome. Like, so I'm an ENTP personality, which anybody that knows the Briggs-Meyer like personality.
Yeah.
I'm a debater. I have been for my entire life. And so I have like plenty of experience. And this is why it's so deep in my heart. It's kind of like one of those things, like when you have a plank in your own eye and you want to pick the speck out of somebody else. I've come to the other side of that. Like, I mean, I was one of those people that would online debate for hours until you couldn't, the opposition would just quit because they're like, I can't even get a word in, like this person's, and so I've just learned like not to do that, because like the whole online debating thing, I think it was kind of the funniest that I had heard. It was like online debating is like playing chess with a pigeon, and it's like it doesn't matter if you win or lose, the pigeon's still going to strut around on the board and poop on it. Like it doesn't matter, like. And then that's how it is with online debating. Like I found myself being pulled into debates and stuff. It causes frustration and anger and animosity towards another person, when I shouldn't even got involved in it, because that person is not gonna learn. But I think the fallacy in it is like, we know that the Holy Spirit has to prep a person because they did with us before we learn things. There was a lot of stuff that you could have told me 10 years ago that was in the Bible, and I would have been like, yeah, right. No, that was not in the Bible. Right. And now after the Holy Spirit has, prepared a lot of things in my life, I looked at him and I'm like, with a whole different set of eyes, because he softened my heart. He removed the scales from my eyelids, removed those, scales from my ears, so that I could see and hear the things that, the Holy Spirit was trying to teach me at the time. And if there is no preparation, no groundwork, and you're just trying to beat somebody over the head with the truth, they're never going to see it. And then they're going to turn and go, that person's nuts. Like, and you can actually cause more damage.
Right. And you're putting a bad taste in their mouth for anybody who comes along and says anything remotely similar,
right?
Which makes it difficult. And that's why the enemy likes to use those counterfeit versions of Christianity or followers of Yeshua, however you want to phrase it, right? Followers of the way. He has those counterfeit versions so that it puts a bad taste. I don't want to get off topic, but in the first couple of years when I was born again, I realized that a lot of the atheists that I was coming across, that I was trying to reach, because I was doing a lot of street preaching and evangelism and stuff like that back then, they were atheists because they were raised Catholic. And they had a bad taste in their mouth for the Bible and anything related to. So, I started, and you start to find out how that's how the enemy works with that. Real quick before we go on, man, you are just burning through these topics and I'm loving it. You're dropping so much wisdom, bro. James 3:13 reminds me of what you were talking about there, hitting that other side of going from causing unnecessary division to being who is a wise man. Endued with knowledge among you, let him show out a good conversation, his works with meekness of wisdom. Right. And typically when you are being led by the Spirit in the moment, I think that's vital for those types of situations, because you're talking about trying to reach somebody and you don't want to beat them over the head with truth, right? And there's a difference between sowing seeds and not seeing what comes out of it. I mean, you could be 1 out of 10 people that need to say something to somebody before it takes any root, right? But if it's being spirit led, then it's what needs to be done, right? Yep. And then there's also the whole leaning on your own understanding rather than being led by spirit, thinking that this is what they need. And I think that's something that we need to remember a lot often as believers, is that no two people's walks are going to be the exact same in terms of which revelations and in which order.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was talking to some people at Take on the World this year about that, about how I came to understanding of the Torah thing. And, you know, a lot of them dropped draws when I explained to them that I was already eating biblically clean, doing holy feasts, doing Shabbat, most of what they see as a difference from when they realized Torah was done away with or not done away with. And I was still preaching that it was done away with.
Yeah.
I wasn't a Torah guy. I was doing what God was telling me spiritually to do. I thought it was a personal thing, but my whole point is if we focus on reaching lost souls in terms of getting them to draw nigh to God and have a relationship with Him, He'll walk them through that path.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we have no idea which revelation they need to hear. So if we're not hearing from the Spirit, this Holy Spirit's not giving us that word in that hour because we're blocking it out or we want to do it our way. Well, you know, I came to this because of flat earth. I came to this because of Torah. I came to this because of this. This is what they need. You know what I mean? Then we're obviously not being led in the Spirit in the moment. But I'm sorry if I.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I guess it's exactly how I feel about it. And the whole aspect of our walk is our own. Like, we have to live that out. That's like, I like when I'm talking to Christians about like their walk and stuff, I'm like, your life should be somewhere between Acts and Revelation. Like, your story should be in there. And I know there's a lot of people, just because, like, you know, going back to what I said about being real with my videos and stuff, there are people that I know that, I mean, there's a lot of the guys that, you know, we all know and we hang out with and talk to and we follow that are real people. And then you've got, you know, 14,000, you know, subscribers or whatever it is on each, you know, these different groups. But then you've got somebody who wears a $1,000 suit and he's got a mega church, you know, and he's as fake as can be, you know, like everything is all hunky dory and everything looks good and people flock to that. But somebody who's real, like, because people are so used to, we lie naturally, and most people don't even understand this. Like, when somebody, you could have a really bad day and somebody will notice it just by the expression or the body language you put off, and they walk by and like, "Are you okay?" What's our first response? "Oh yeah, no, everything's fine."
Right.
We just lied,
Yeah.
like, and we didn't even realize it. You know, we've been conditioned to put on a mask, and that was something I learned from way back as a young teenager, like preteen, was when I moved from one town to another. I was bullied and picked on when I was up in the other town, because the way my parents raised me to hang out with the kids that, you know, were less fortunate and stuff like that. So I got lumped in with a group of kids that nobody liked. So I got picked on and was bullied quite a bit as a preteen. And we moved to a different area, and it was a completely different part of the state. And I realized that, like, nobody knew what my past was like, and I could create my own kind of reality, and people didn't need to know stuff I didn't want to tell them. So even from a young age, I realized, like, there's this mask that we can put on and kind of put out there, like everything's okay. The problem is, though, the Bible doesn't tell us to hide that. It doesn't tell us to hide our light under a bushel. Everything that we go through, every problem that we face, everything that God has gotten us through, we shouldn't be ashamed of. Like, if we've repented of those things, I'll put it that way. If we've repented of those things and we've moved to the other side, we shouldn't be ashamed of those. We should be outreaching to those people that are in that same situation and say, "Look, God brought me to the other side of this. I was right where you're at." And this goes back to the parable about the guy that has the plank. I was
just going to say that. Have you ever thought about this? And it's probably already clicked for you on this, maybe not. But for me, it hit me 10 times harder a couple of years ago when all of a sudden I realized, you know, because the average person says, yeah, you got to take the plank out so you can see, right? You got to be able to work on yourself before you can, and God's got to lead you through your stuff and things like that. But have you ever considered the situation of, if you take that plank out, you know all the better more what it's like to have that speck.
Right.
You can relate to that person on that level, like you're talking about. You can reach that soul, say, hey, I've been there, done that. You know, bought the t-shirt and the hat. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, because to me, that speck that's in your neighbor's eye and that log in your own come from the same tree.
Right.
So you've got this big log, and a lot of people skip the fact that that person was trying to help someone else. It said he was trying to help a brother. And
Right.
you know, you're going to be whacking him over the head with this log that's in your eye while you're trying to pick a speck out of his. But now when the Holy Spirit removes that plank from your own eye, now you can see clearly.
Right.
And now you can help your brother that has that tiny little speck. And you say, hey man, look, trust me, I had this log sticking out of my eye. I can help you with this tiny little speck. And
Right.
that's the way that God has commissioned us to like do things, is get to the other side of your sin first with the Holy Spirit's help. Find the grace and all of that on the other side of it. Now you have a story. Now
Right.
that story can outreach to all the people who are in the same spot that you were. You have a relatability, a relationship. You have a connection, a starting point to go reach out and talk to people with the things that you had already dealt with. And a lot of
Right.
people, I think, they hide those things. And then they pack them away and they're like, well, I'm different now. Well, yeah, of course we are. We're born again. We're a new creation.
Right.
We still have those memories. We still have those associations, and we can relate because our story should carry on what that biblical text is. So, I mean, to me, it all ties together, all of these different topics.
They do. That's why you've been able to roll from one to the next, man. you're just a train moving, man. I hope people are sitting there really listening in and taking notes or whatever, because you're hitting a lot, man.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess that my biggest problem is a lot of people, excuse me, a lot of people look at the internet because of the anonymity of it. You can kind of go onto Facebook, you can jump into a conversation, you can drop a couple of truth bombs, or you can smack somebody over the head with a Bible, and then you can walk away from your computer and go watch TV.
Sure.
No repercussions whatsoever in your mind.
Right.
The thing is, though, we have an omnipotent God who sees everything that you do. And there are plenty of parables. This is part of the reason why I'm covering parables on my channel, is because there are plenty of parables that talk about, I mean, how many times did Jesus say, this is a parable and this is how the kingdom is like?
Right. Yeah, dude.
And we just kind of glaze right over it. Oh, that's a cool story. Thanks, Jesus. You know, like, so, I mean, if we want to understand God better and how God sees us and how God requires things of us, he put Jesus here to tell us exactly that. It's in when it says, you know, Jesus said this, you should probably pay attention because it's important. And so I want to direct everybody back to, you know, because we kind of, I love the exposed stuff and a lot of things that have come out, and there's some really awesome people that are into that, and they have passions that God has planted in them that they're super passionate about, that they're exposing, you know, things to let, because there's a lot of Christians that just have no idea that a lot of this stuff is going on, and it's awesome that they're doing it. But to me, I'm reaching out to a lot of the truther community and trying to go, hey, come back to your first love. Like, to me, Revelations 2:2 with the Church of Ephesus is really important to the truther community, because I believe that's what we are the Church of Ephesus. And to just go out there and I guess you have to understand, like, I don't know if everybody understands what the Church of Ephesus was, but it was outside of Jerusalem to the east, and it was the gateway to all the rest of the churches. And so any kind of new doctrine that was coming through or out of Jerusalem, or Gnostic texts or whatever, these people that had to go through Ephesus. So Ephesus got really, really good at weeding out all of the false doctrines, all the false apostles, the false teachers. But the problem is they started turning on each other. Like, you know, they started seeing, you know, like the devil behind every doorknob. Like, I mean, it was and Jesus, you know, like it says that when in Revelation, when he's, you know, it's clearly talking about the Messiah says, I'll pull your candlestick or your menorah. Repent of this. You have to go back to your first love. Remember what it was like when you first became a Christian, how much you loved God, how much you loved your neighbor. Like, that was, I mean, when the Pharisees came to Jesus and they asked him what the greatest commandment was, he knew what the greatest commandment was. It's love God with all of your heart, mind, and, you know, your soul. Like, but then he says, and carries it on and says, and the other one is almost like the first, but love your neighbor. Right. You know, like,
and upon those two, everything else hangs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And I told you, these are the two greater ones. If you're going to focus on anything, it should be those two.
Right. And Jesus says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And I mean, you can break that down however you want to, but I mean, he gave two that are very specific, and they cover all of the 10 commandments. He says all of the Torah and all of the prophets hang on.
Law and prophets. Yeah.
I mean, if you want to, you got people that come up and they're like, well, how do I keep all 613? Don't. Just
Well,
love God
it's
and
not
love
even possible to do that. And there's the
right.
arguments of it's the 613 or 1015, and that's a whole nother show. I mean,
Oh yeah.
unless you really want to go there, I was actually thinking we should start going into faith without works. But if you got something else, I'm gonna hit the latrine for 2 seconds because I've had like 2 cups of coffee.
No,
So
you're fine.
you can either get a cup of coffee or you can tell them about your new channel door opening with Chadrick.
Yeah. I'll yeah, definitely. I'll talk
If
about
you
that.
give me just 2 seconds here.
All right. So yeah, I'm working with Ian Chadrick. I'm sure a lot of you guys know him as the Holy Hand Grenade. And we are going to be working with the guys from Through the Black. So I don't know if you guys know who Tom and Jared are. We're going to be going to their channel. And we're going to be talking about spiritual warfare. It's going to be called SitRep 2020. It starts in the first of this year. Ian and I are actually getting together here pretty soon to kind of do some promos and get everything going. But we're going to cover, I mean, if anybody's followed the Holy Hand Grenades channel, you're going to kind of understand where we're at. We're looking at kind of the greater picture, the things that are going on in the background, the things that are kind of going on like that most people don't see. And we're also going to be talking about like the spiritual warfare aspect of it, what we need to be doing, where we need to be at. I think a lot of people understand that there's a war going on. It's a beautiful war. I mean, because look at all the things around you, the flowers and all that kind of stuff. God could have made it gray and we could have eaten energy pellets, but he didn't. He made it beautiful. And that's from a friend of mine. This is Tony Stover's little quote. He made it really beautiful. And we're in this war, but we have to understand the enemy, his tactics, that he is wise like a serpent and that he prowls around looking to destroy. And so the whole concept is going to be talking about understanding your enemy and understanding our tactics of taking back territories, spiritual warfare in your home, spiritual warfare in your neighborhood, spiritual warfare at your work, spiritual warfare wherever you go, because that's important. Anybody that knows anything about the occult understands the occult works in darkness. They work in death, but we work for a living God, and he is using us while we're alive. So we want to make sure that when we're out there, we're not wasting our time. We're not running around. Kind of a little story. I kept with my job. I kind of travel around some of the bad areas of our city, and I would have really bad days. And then I would have other days where I'd say, you know what, God, I'm just going to give this day to you. And I would have some of the most like awesome interactions with people, you know, I'd end up praying for like elderly ladies and that are going through terrible times. And I mean, it's just great things. And what I started realizing is, though, I wasn't doing that every single day. I wasn't going out and taking the areas that God was sending me to. I could be claiming those. Like I could, you know, wherever my feet walk, I can claim that as territory for God. I can do spiritual warfare when I'm in that spot. And we need to start doing that. We need to start taking back territory because that's why we're here. So that's kind of like where we're going to go with that. It's called SitRep 2020, and it's going to be talking about a lot of awesome things. And I hope everybody gets the chance to tune in. And you're back.
I am.
All right. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out where we were at. So yeah, I guess my whole message with, you know, about our kind of interactions that we do online is we have to really be cognizant of not only our friends and family, you know, watching, but we have brothers and sisters. And we don't always get to determine that. I notice that a lot, that people will say, you know, like, oh, well, so-and-so doesn't do this, so they're not a brother or sister, so I can say whatever I want to them. That's not how that works. Like God determines who's a brother and sister, and a person can go their entire life and walk a certain way. And then God finally reveals the things that he wants to show them towards the end of their life. We can't judge a person's walk based on a snapshot of their life. People used to do that to me all the time when I was, you know, growing up. Oh, he'll never be a Christian. He'll never be, you know, this, or he's, you know, and here I am. So we really, I mean, if we serve a God who takes a Saul and turns him into a Paul. That's kind of been my running saying. I mean, if he can take somebody who had apostle blood on his hands and turn him into somebody who has primary doctrine of our belief that we read consistently, teaching the first century church and how we should be walking today. If he can take somebody like that in the midst, I mean, can you imagine the people like that were terrified of Saul? Like when he converted and came back and was like, "Hey, I love Jesus," and they were like,
Yeah, right.
What is, I'm sure there was a group of people going, "He's an infiltrator,"
Right. And then you've got the non-believers thinking like, so is he going to start killing in the name of Christianity now? Like, there's all
Right.
kinds of
Right. And what did Paul preach? Paul preached love.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my favorite passages from him is, that of course everybody knows the love is patient, love is kind, but the passage right before that says, I could speak with the tongues of all man and angels, but if I don't have love, it means absolutely nothing.
Right.
I can have all the knowledge of God, have faith to remove mountains, but without love, it means nothing. I mean, that was Paul. Paul probably blew people away. I mean, when they knew him for what he was filled with hate, who was a Pharisee of Pharisees, and then turns around and he's coming out talking about love and this and that. They're probably going, "What is going on here?" But that was Paul's story. That's why Paul did what he did, is because of that conversion, that change that was so drastic. And we have to be really cognizant that we're not out there smacking somebody over the head and saying, "Well, you're not a Christian." That's what Paul was doing a lot of times in the first century church. Was there were Gentile Christians in these communes, and there were people who were Jewish, Messianic Jews that were in these communes too. And they were saying, "Well, you can't be a believer like this unless you get circumcised, or, you follow this practice or this practice." And Paul's like writing them and saying like, "No, look, guys, you can't take away, they're Christians because of faith. You can't take that away from them. You can't resort them back to not being Christian and then make them follow some rules to become Christians. They're already Christians." Like, I think it's a lot of people confuse like the idea of Paul and try to use that to be anti-Torah. But all Paul was trying to do was saying, look, they're already Christians, guys. Like, God will work with them. Like, let God, let the Holy Spirit be the Holy Spirit. You're not the Holy Spirit. So let it work.
Yeah. And that's really what you're getting at there too, is to, I mean, because there's a difference between righteous judgment and unrighteous judgment. But righteous judgment is never determining if that person will ever be saved in their entire life. That's not, when it comes to our righteous judgment through us, rather, obviously with the Father, but yeah, we don't know where they're at in their walk, what's to come ahead, and again, that I always take that back to, you got to be spirit led in the moment.
Right.
If you want to know what to say, when to say it, how to say it, who to say it to, it's got to be spirit led, or otherwise, whether you realize it or not, whether your intentions are there or not, you're leaning on your own understanding, which we've all done and will do from time to time, and we got to learn how to adjust and shift and adjust fire, right? Adjust and shift fire. That was the terms we used when I was in the military.
Yeah. And the best way to do that is to understand, like, just read the words of Jesus. I mean, like, I see a lot of people like it, that they want to go to this teacher or this book to understand the biblical text. The Bible, if you got a Bible you can't understand because of the these, thous, this is that's, or whatever, go get one you can understand. Like, I understand there are translation errors and all kinds of stuff, but in general, the text is 98.2% accurate to the Dead Sea Scrolls and the oldest text we have. There's no other textual document that is that old that is that accurate. So you can nitpick here and there and whatever, but the honest truth is we need that text. There's no like Mandela effect that's going to change. You're going to wake up one day and there's no Jesus. Like, that's
right.
The Bible is, God says he's going to, because God is not the author of confusion, and that would really confuse the hearts of his followers. There may be a time when we can't have Bibles, but right now we have biblical texts and we really need to be studying those. And all of that, it says all of the text is for study and correction.
Yeah.
You don't need somebody else to teach you how to understand that Bible. That Bible is so multi-layered. It can be as shallow, like that a 3-year-old can understand the biblical stories, but as deep, you can spend your entire life trying to understand and learn the mysteries of God. Like, it's all there. You don't need to go somewhere else to get it. And you don't need somebody else to teach you, like, because your pastor or your teacher on YouTube or whatever is not going to like open the door for you like a doorman and let you in to the gates of heaven. Like, your relationship with God is how you're going to get in there. And the only way to like really understand is that love letter that he left for us, which is the Bible.
Right. I mean, he'll work through us to each other.
Right.
but to rely on that, like you said. And then, the way I like to look at it, I used to say this in videos a few years ago, is that we're basically in a classroom, right? And you can compare your notes and your study notes and your homework and stuff to other students. They do that, whether it's grade school, high school, college. You can do that. You can compare other notes and stuff, but bear in mind, you're comparing notes with another student. At the end of the day, if you don't take that to the teacher's desk
Yeah.
and ask him to mark it with that red marker, then you have no idea if
Yeah.
you've just accepted something that sounds right but isn't.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's and to me, like the personal relationship aspect of it, I think one of the like really kind of mind check moments for me that really kind of got me going, I need to work on my relationship with God, was going back over and reading the text and what Jesus says. Many will come to me and say, Lord, Lord, did we not do miracles and cast out demons and do all these things in your name? And he
Yeah.
says, turn away from me, you workers of iniquity, or you workers of lawlessness. I don't know you. He has
Yeah.
no relationship with you. And that goes right
Yep.
back, coincides with the 10 brides. 5 of them he knew and took into the wedding chamber to be intimate, to know intimately.
Right.
And then the other ones, when they came to the door, knocked on the door, he said the same thing. I don't
Yeah.
know you.
Yeah, door was closed. The door was
Yeah.
closed. They missed the thing, but they didn't know him. And that I always emphasize on that as well. A lot of people like to emphasize on the whole workers of iniquity,
Right.
and they forget the whole I never knew you.
Yeah.
And despite the whole thing that when they said we did miracles and stuff, he didn't say no, you didn't, or
Right.
that there were false miracles. He doesn't say any of that, which is a whole nother topic. But
Well, the other part that a lot of people skip is that they said, we did these things. Like, I did
right,
these things in
right,
your name. Like, it didn't say the Holy Spirit did these things through me, but I did these
right,
things. So there's a lot of people out there. Like, I mean, if God's calling you, like, I don't know, with this whole thing, like, this was not like, this was not what I wanted to do. Usually God calls you into something that's going to humble you and put you in a position that you don't really want to do. So there's a lot of pastors and stuff out there that I really kind of like question why they're there. I've actually went up to several pastors at churches and said, why are you here? And some of the answers that I get like are really shocking to me. Like, because my dad was a pastor, because I flunked out of this, so I went to seminary school. It's like, what? Because I mean, like my family grew up doing deliverance ministry. And if you ever hear Tom or Jared talk about it, and they say people come up to them all the time, and they're like, hey man, I want to get in the deliverance ministry. And they're like, no, you don't. Like, if you're called to it, it's like, you don't really want to do it. It's pretty, it's pretty crazy stuff. Like, and I question anybody that says, yeah, I want to do that. But there are people who are, full 100% hard in for God, and they do want to do whatever he asks. But in most cases, a lot of, like myself, I need to be put in my place and, drop kick sometimes to be humble. And, so he's going to ask me to do things that I don't really want to do, puts me in uncomfortable positions because I think he thinks it's funny. So,
well, I think he has multiple reasons why he does things like that. He's got that onion layer thing of like, he finds it funny. There's a lesson to be learned. He finds it funny. You know what I mean? Like, there's an experience you need to gain so you can help somebody else. He finds it funny. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean,
but
he's awesome in the way that he does things. And I still try to wrap it's almost impossible for a finite being to understand an infinite creature like that, just the creator of all things. Like, trying to wrap your head around that is just, but the fact that he interacts with us the way that he does, and like just the things that the beauty of the world that he has created. It just shows like all of that, like each one of us is an image bearer of God. So our talents, our gifts, the things that we love, those are all like just a kind of a piece of God. So we need to start seeing God in our, like those pieces of God in our brothers and our sisters, because he loves and cares for them. We need to, and those gifts that they're given and those problems and troubles that they're dealing with, those need to be like our problems and troubles. We need to be an outreached hand for everybody, not one that's like hitting them over the head, like with a hammer.
Bear each other's burdens,
right?
Scripture says, right? Yeah.
Because we all know we can't do it out there alone.
Right. And
there's a lot of people that try, and there's a lot of people that end up, desperately looking for a fellowship and friendship and people they can talk to. And it's a sad, lonely world. And we do know that this world is controlled by, an enemy, and, Jesus didn't joke around with him, call him the prince and the God of this world. And I don't think we should take it like, we should definitely be serious about understanding that there's an enemy out there. Like, but we really have to concentrate on our walks and then our relationships with our brothers and sisters, with our loving our neighbor, loving God. Like that stuff will, I mean, all the evil stuff, like that is going to be taken care of. We're on the winning side. Like God's going to call certain people to be warriors, certain people to be outreach, some people to be watchers on the wall. Like if you don't know where you stand or where your position is, you need to start asking God, like, hey, what do you want to use me for? Where do you need me at? Or if I need fellowship, God, bring people into my life that are going to, that can keep me in checks and balances, that keep me from, sinning, or somebody that I can confide in, somebody that I can talk to, somebody who's been to the other side, somebody that can help me. Like we really need to start asking for God, or asking God for those things. And if it's in his will, he's definitely going to grant it. So,
right. And, a lot of times I've over the years on Facebook and stuff, I'll get people messaging me, asking me, saying, I keep praying for this. I keep praying for this. And one of the things that the Spirit tends to tell me is that person, when they're praying, they're doing a repetitional prayer. And I'm not trying to bash the person. I'm trying to say, when you have a situation that if you don't feel any growth, if you don't feel like you're getting any answers, there's zero movement, it's complete stagnant, and you feel like you keep doing the same prayer, then you need to start checking that prayer and ask yourself, are you treating it like a personal conversation? This is supposed to be a relationship with the Father, right? I like telling people that, if every single day I had 3 sentences and that's all I said to my wife is those exact same 3 sentences, word for word, she wouldn't be my wife for very much longer. You know what I mean? Because that's not a relationship. That's nothing. And the sad truth is, I don't know about everybody, but in my situation, when I was growing up as a Christian in the church, right? You were kind of instilled with that understanding of, you say your prayer every night, and it was a vain, repetitious prayer without even realizing. I wasn't doing Hail Marys, but I might as well have been.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. No, yeah. And I think, I don't know. And I think that may be kind of like residue from kind of where the modern Christian church has went, is kind of this, genie, God is a genie in a bottle kind of thing. You see that a lot with prosperity gospel teaching and stuff like that. But what we really need to be praying for, I mean, if there was anybody in all of history that knew prayer, it was Jesus. He was like if there was somebody who had a PhD in prayer, it would be him. It says he prayed without ceasing. And when he saw the people around him, I can imagine why, because he was constantly praying for people. I imagine him taking a step and asking God, is this where you want me? Is this where you want me? Is this where you want me? Like he was constantly praying. And when they came to him and they asked him, hey, how do we pray? What does he say? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Like right there in that whole thing is your will be done.
Right.
Like in that prayer. I broke that down for my son one day, like bit by bit, just trying to like tell him it's not about asking for, a new Xbox or a Lamborghini or, drastic changes in your life. It's for God's will to be done. And sometimes when we're asking for something like, hey, God, look, I really want to do this. I really want to do this. But if it's not God's will and you're not hearing anything, maybe we need to start asking a different question, or asking God, hey, like, or maybe he even asked you to step out on something and you just haven't done it because it's not what you want to do. Right. So that's one thing that I noticed with a lot of things that Jesus did when he healed people. He asked them to do something first. They had to step out in faith. Like, the guy that had the crippled hand, he said, stretch out your hand. Well, if you've lived with your entire life of your hand being crippled, it's going to take some faith to be like, okay, my hand's it was after he stretched out his hand, he was healed. The same thing with the man who was crippled. He says, he didn't say, okay, you're healed, get up. He said, no, pick up your bedroll. And when that guy picked up his bedroll, there was faith in that. Right. And so much so that like, even when Jesus went to his hometown, their lack of faith, it says because they didn't have faith in him, because they saw him grow up, they're like, oh, that's the carpenter's son. Because of their lack of faith, he was only able to heal a few people. Yeah. So sometimes our walk, like if we're not getting answers on those kind of things, it's maybe gets because God has already asked us to do something and you don't want to do it. Maybe it's time to start walking out in faith. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't God asking me to do something and I stepped out in faith. So, and I can tell you, like, my entire life has been a miracle after a miracle after a miracle. They're all around you. Just have to realize that he's there working, and his fingerprints are everywhere.
Right. It says acknowledge him in everything, right? And if you're not able to do that, you need to start looking into that kind of thing. But Yeah, man, that's a powerful point. That's a powerful point. I like that, the whole stretching out of the arm bit. That's good stuff, man. We need to talk more, you and I, dude. We need to do some studies and some debates and things. I think we
Yeah,
have
man.
get into some stuff.
I love the, you know, the community of guys that we have across different platforms. And back to what you were saying about, we don't all agree on this on all topics.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are some guys that are flat earth, there's some that are Torah observant, some that aren't.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's not our centralized focus. Our
Right.
centralized focus is directing people to the Messiah. Whatever, you know, like Rob Skiba, he was about the Nephilim thing and then the flat earth thing. It's because that's where God has his passion at. And then he's trying to go in and do seed stuff.
Yeah.
So, but you know, that's his passion. That's where God has his heart. That doesn't mean, you know, the people that are on the outside going, oh, well, he's not talking about Jesus enough. Like, he's doing what God's asked him to do. There's, you know, a finger can't be an ear, you know? So
Right. Chadwick always likes to quote me on this, but talking about the different members of the body, about how an eyeball doesn't work like a foot. One can handle gravel better than the other. One can see better than the other one. Right? There's the different roles there. That's good stuff. But you know, the funny thing is about that circle of speakers and their close knit friends and everything of that, with the take on the world and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure every hot topic that people divide on there's at least one person on each side within that circle.
Oh yeah.
And there's no issues.
No.
Like,
I mean,
zero issues. I mean, there's a disagreement, and each will make sure that they know why. Like, hey, well, I believe this because of this, and they'll show the reasons why, which you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be able to show why you believe something.
Right. And I mean, as long as it's biblical, I mean, see, and this is what I learned from debating. Like, me being the personality type that I am, I learned from debating a person. I have had lots of debates with atheists and agnostics, people of different religions, and have these conversations because, like, I usually don't talk about stuff I don't already understand. So I have already, like, if I'm having a debate with an atheist, I already have a very good understanding of what they believe, because usually it's regurgitated. It's the same thing over and over and over again. So I already know what they're going to say before they say it. It makes it really easy to trap them in conversations. But on the same aspect, I'm not trying to debate them to win. I'm trying to debate them to understand why they got to where they're at and why they feel the way they do. They didn't just come to the idea that there's no God just because they woke up one day and was like, oh, there's no God. There's a whole line of their life that brought them to that point where they lost hope. And having those understandings and, like, really debating a person and getting to know, like, why they're at where they're at. And discernment is key in a lot of those things. But you can have these conversations with another person to understand why they feel the way they do. Maybe the next time you have that conversation, you're going to have a better understanding of why they feel the way they do, why they still celebrate Christmas, why they still, you know, believe the earth is a globe, or they believe whatever. Right. So, especially, I mean, with the holidays coming around the corner, I think it's very important. We have a lot. I mean, I don't celebrate Christmas or Easter. We do the biblical feast the best that we can. I mean, we're still learning, and everybody's got different calendars and stuff, but we're still trying to do the best that we can. And I think doing something is better than doing nothing or doing pagan. You know, I walked into like what was it? It was like I can't remember the store. It was like a Michael's or something. I walk in with my wife and they got Halloween decorations, Christmas decorations, and Thanksgiving decorations. And I walk in, I'm like, I smell pagan. You just died laughing. But I mean, we still have a lot of family and friends, though, that celebrate those things. And what kind of outreach are you doing to your family and friends? What kind of love are you showing? Like, you always have to look at these situations. There's Jesus, and Jesus says, love your neighbors, love God. And then you have the Pharisees, who are constantly condemning and accusations and slinging and basically walking around saying, my walk is better than everybody else's. My tassels are longer than everybody else's. So when you come to a situation, there's a fork in the road. Are you going to be like Jesus and be Christ-like, which is why we're called Christians? We're supposed to be Christ-like. Or are you going to be a Pharisee? So when you've got friends and family members and stuff like that are around that don't understand why, you got two choices. Are you going to completely cut them off and kick them to the curb and be like, "Up, see ya, you know, I hope you don't go to hell," or are you going to walk and go to talk to them and say, "Hey, look, this is why we do it." I mean, like, we have family members that celebrate Christmas, and we don't put Christmas trees in our house and stuff like that, but we will go be with family. But we also invite them to Passover. We also invite them to Sukkot for a dinner and stuff like that. It's like, hey, look, we'll come and spend time with family during that. You guys come hang out, and we can have more holidays than what you guys are used to. You know, like, there's that outreach needs to be there. We need to be doing all things with love.
Right. Like you were talking about in the beginning of the video on unnecessary division, unnecessarily cutting people out and not doing anything. I mean, what good is that?
Right.
If you're cutting them out and you're not even praying or whatever. What good is that? Where is the profit in that?
Yeah.
Where is the gain though? You know what I mean?
Yeah. You also have to remember, I mean, I focus on this because, you know, my love and my passion is for people in the body. I want to see everybody thrive. I want to see the church grow and flourish. I don't want to see the enemy using the art of war strategy of division, because he does it in everything else. I mean, politics, the government has interjected itself into every single topic. So you have to pick a side. We don't need that in our beliefs. And if we focus on the core, the real truth, and yeah, we can have our, you know, offshoot things and we can talk about those, and we have to be open for correction if we're kind of veering off into some craziness. But we have to understand though, like, that this isn't just for the body though. Like, we have outsiders who are outside watching us.
Yeah.
When it says, you know, love your neighbor as yourself, that neighbor is not always your brother. That neighbor.
Right. We have that example. Who is your neighbor?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We literally have that in the scriptures. Who is your neighbor? And he tells you, you know. So, I mean, you know, maybe it's the Samaritan that you don't care for. You know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be ambassadors. That's been kind of the theme here of the whole night, is we're supposed to be ambassadors. We're supposed to be examples. We're supposed to be being spirit-led and pay attention to the bigger picture and not be so focused on the minute details. Just because we might have something doesn't mean it's meant to be brought up, and definitely not bashed over somebody else's head.
Right.
You're talking about like the family members with different things, and I think a lot of believers who are walking the Holy Feast out have that. They can relate to that. There's somebody, if not most of their family. And, you know, it's interesting. It's one of those, like, you know, just because you can see that issue doesn't mean that that's the next step for them.
Right.
You know what I mean? And just because you see that speck, what if that's not the first speck that needs to be taken out right now?
Yeah.
You're going to focus on that when they really need to worry about the strife or the envy or the anger issues, the bitter issues. They need to know God. Yeah. Right? And well, dude, you and I could talk all night. I got to stop us before we go way past Chad's time here. And you know, I don't want to be stepping on toes and things like that. But dude, you and I could talk to you all night.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. And I would, you know, love to talk to you. I told Ian the next time that he gets in the conversation, or you guys go to Town and answer questions, that you guys have to get me involved in that.
Yeah, he's been saying he was wanting to do that ever since last year. He wants to do it live and things like that. And
that would be so fun.
I gave him and Tony a stipulation that I'm not going to say in this video right now, but I gave them one stipulation, so we'll see what comes out of that. All right, well, I'm going to let it go, but I did connect in the link on the Facebook post. I put your Omega Chronicles TV link.
Right. Yep.
I also put on Through the Blacks link on there. I've got the Facebook and the YouTube for your Omega thing. Is there anything else that you wanted to get out before this video ends?
No, I'm just that I love you guys, and, you know, I want to see us all grow, and just, you know, be brothers and sisters. Like, that's how I want to see all of us, and then, you know, and pull our family and friends and people that, you know, we love into the circle too. Like, if you've gotten the opportunity to ever go to a conference and feel like you're at a family reunion with people you've never met before, that's what the kingdom of heaven is going to be like. And we all want to get there. Like, so let's work on that. Let's concentrate on our brothers and our sisters, and concentrate on our neighbors, concentrate on our coworkers. You know, let's be a shining light to everybody, instead of, you know, hiding our light under a bushel. You know, let's walk that love. Like, let's do it.
Walk it out. That's a good message. Love God and your neighbor. It's starting to sound very familiar though. All right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. I think we'll probably have you on again sometime.
Yeah, sure. Anytime.
When you're able to, and hopefully it won't be as last minute as tonight.
That's all right.
All right. Thank you for joining us. All the links are on the post. This has been Disputed Lands. Good night.